If there's one universal constant in this galaxy, it's that some alien empires simply refuse to do their homework. Take the Varnock Dominion, for instance, a warlike coalition of insectoid tyrants known more for brute force than strategic brilliance. They've mastered wormhole engineering, developed suns as weapons, and obliterated civilizations for sneezing too loudly. And yet, they didn't think twice about kidnapping the children of humanity's three most feared military strategists. Bad move. Truly, catastrophically bad. Let me set the scene. It's a dull Thursday on Arkan Command, humanity's orbital stronghold circling Mars 2. General Lucan, Ironhand, Drax is reviewing a weapons audit, grumbling about missing plasma stockpiles and a broken coffee dispenser. Lucan didn't earn the nickname Ironhand for being warm and fuzzy. He once crushed a rebel uprising by literally dropping an asteroid on their capital by hand. His idea of diplomacy? Vaporize first, send regrets later. So when his aide, Lieutenant Mira, interrupts with a grim face, he barely looks up. "Sir, we have a transmission. Encrypted. Varnock Dominion." Drax freezes mid-sip. "They better not be trying to sell us insect silk again." "It's about your daughter, sir." Silence. Coffee mug hits the floor. Across the solar system, Admiral Karanox is mid-simulation aboard the dreadnought Scourge of Silence, testing black hole mines. Her comm is legendary. Her kill record is classified. So when she gets a similar message about her son, the ship's temperature drops 5 degrees. And in the Andromeda Defense Sector, High Marshal Ronan Vale, humanity's coldest tactician, gets word his niece has been taken. He hasn't smiled in 7 years. That day, he does a slow, terrifying smile that makes 2 officers faint. The Varnock demand was simple. Deliver 800 million credits within 72 hours, or your spawn join the slaves of Draylock Prime. The message was delivered by Overseer Zithran, a 7-foot-tall beetle with glowing mandibles and the charisma of a tax audit. He spoke with the smugness of someone who'd never been punched through a bulkhead before. "We have the younglings. Do not attempt rescue. You won't find us." He smiles badly. Then the transmission cuts. The response? Let's just say, not diplomatic. Within an hour, Drax, Nox, and Vale are on a secure link. No greetings. No protocol. "Planet Busters ready?" asks Nox. "Charged and loaded," Drax replies. "Fleet already in warp," says Vale. "We're sterilizing every Varnock outpost from here to the Draylock cluster." "Collateral damage?" Nox asks. Drax shrugs. "Define collateral." Meanwhile, aboard a Varnock transport ship deep in uncharted space, 3 kids sit in a makeshift brig. 12-year-old Arya Drax is already halfway through dismantling her restraints with a sharpened spoon. 10-year-old Leo Nox is rewiring the force field with a broken communicator. And 8-year-old Juno Vale. She's quietly memorizing the guards' patrol routes. "Backwards. You know," Arya mutters, "they really should have checked our last names before snatching us." "They still think we're just normal human kids," says Leo, sparking something behind the panel. "Idiots," Juno whispers, slipping a pin from her hair. "They're gonna wish they'd abducted a black hole instead." Just then, the door hisses open. Overseer Zithran stomps in, flanked by guards. "Awake at last. Prepare to be sold." He stops. Arya is standing, unbound. Leo is holding what looks like a makeshift EMP grenade. Juno is missing entirely. "Where's the third one?" the Overseer snarls. "Right behind you," Juno says sweetly, before knocking him unconscious with his own command baton. Back in human space, the fleet arrives. Varnock sentries blink in confusion as 30 human warships exit warp directly inside their defense grid. Drax's voice rings through open comms. "This is General Drax. You took my daughter. Return her, or we turn your empire into protein dust." The Varnock try to respond. They don't finish. The rescue is over in 10 minutes. The kids are recovered. The captor's less lucky. But the galaxy won't forget what happened. Not because of the firepower, not because of the wreckage, but because the Varnock Dominion, a force feared across the stars, made one fatal mistake. They forgot that beneath the medals and battle scars, those commanders were still parents. And nothing, not black holes, not entire empires, burns hotter than a parent's wrath. Chapter 2. The Signal in the Void. They thought it was over. The children were home. The Varnock Dominion was in ruins. The stars were quiet again. But then came the signal. It started as static, a ghost whisper through the edges of human long-range scanners. Harmless at first. Random. Until it wasn't. Admiral Kara Knox received the decrypted message first, deep aboard her battleship orbiting Epsilon Delta 9. It wasn't Varnock tech. It was older, colder, alien even by alien standards. The message played on a loop, in a voice that chilled even her hardened bones. They have awakened. The children are not yours. You are merely caretakers. Prepare to surrender what was never truly human. At the same time, deep within the intelligence vaults of Arkan Command, General Drax watched the same transmission. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just slowly turned to his aide and said, "Give me Project Helix files. Now." Meanwhile, on Earth, Juno Vale sat in silence. The others were trying to return to normal life. School, media interviews, therapy sessions with well-meaning experts who had no idea what they were dealing with. But Juno knew something was wrong. She could feel it. Not fear, not trauma. Something alive beneath her skin. A hum in her bones. A pull, like gravity from a star that shouldn't exist. She hadn't told her uncle. Not yet. Because part of her remembered a voice during the captivity. One none of the others had heard. It had whispered through the ship's walls. Through her dreams. You're not theirs. You never were. In a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of a Varnock fortress, a scout drone blinked online. Its feed was corrupted, its memory cache glitching. But one image was clear. A room, massive, obsidian, breathing with alien energy. Inside it, 3 stasis pods. Inside each pod, a human child. Identical to Arya, Leo, and Juno. But older, twisted, and very much awake. Back on Earth, Leo was the first to collapse. One moment, he was fixing a hoverbike in his backyard. The next, he was screaming in a language no human had ever spoken, eyes glowing white-hot, shattering the pavement around him with a psychic pulse that knocked birds from the sky. Arya arrived at the hospital 10 minutes later. Not because she'd been called, because she felt it happen. At 0300 hours, the 3 commanders met again. This time, not in war rooms, but in a classified vault beneath the Polaris Spire. Project Helix was reopened. Files that hadn't seen light in 17 years were unsealed. Kara Knox was the first to speak. We thought we could bury it, that it wouldn't resurface. Ronan Vale shook his head. We were wrong. Luke and Drax, eyes hard as meteorite, simply said, they were never just our kids. They were part of the prototype batch. And as the stars shifted in the night sky, far beyond the Orion expanse, a forgotten AI satellite pinged a new anomaly. A fleet, not Varnock, not human, no known drive signature, no heat trail, just a name, burned into its transmission code, looping endlessly. The original claimants. And they were coming. Not for war, not for revenge, but to reclaim what was theirs. The children were never kidnapped. They were retrieved. Chapter 3. The Original Claimants. Somewhere in the dark between stars, the fleet drifted. No engine trails, no comms, no visible heat signatures. Just silence. And yet every sensor screamed. Admiral Kara Knox watched the data on the holoscreen, her jaw tight. How fast are they moving? Her science officer shook her head, pale. They're not. At least, not by any physics we understand. One moment they're here, and the next. She gestured. The map pulsed again. The ships had shifted position by nearly 100 light years. They're jumping without displacement, she whispered. Kara narrowed her eyes. Or the universe is moving around them. Elsewhere, deep within the Mars 2 medical vault, Leo Knox was waking up. His body trembled. His eyes glowed dimly, flickering between gold and white. Machines around him whined and sparked, unable to stabilize his vitals. Arya stood nearby, fists clenched. She didn't understand what was happening. Not fully. But she understood this. Leo wasn't just sick. He was changing. Juno sat cross-legged in the corner, staring out the window. "They're calling him back," she said softly. "Who?" Arya snapped. Juno's voice was calm. Too calm. "The ones who made us." In the classified vaults of Arkan Command, General Lucan Drax slammed his fist into the war table. "You knew," he growled. "All these years, Vale. You knew the prototypes weren't stable." High Marshal Ronan Vale didn't flinch. "I knew they were dangerous. That's why I buried the project. And then let them live normal lives? With families." Drax snapped. "They were infants, Lucan. What was I supposed to do, kill them?" Drax's silence said maybe. But General Vale had his own secrets. He pulled up a file, restricted Omega Black clearance. A file named Genetic Memory Activation Protocol. According to the file, the prototypes weren't just enhanced. They were embedded with ancient neural code, recovered from a long-dead alien archive. The original claimants weren't just some unknown species. They were the source, the architects of all human evolution, the makers of minds. And the children, Arya, Leo, Juno, weren't their targets. They were their property. At that exact moment, across the galaxy, the silent fleet finally moved. They didn't warp in. They didn't descend from orbit. They appeared, in perfect formation, above Earth's moon. No weapons drawn. No word spoken. Just one universal signal broadcast to every screen, every device, every implanted chip in human territory. "We have come to collect." Panic spread across Earth like wildfire. Crowds, riots, governments scrambling, satellites crashing from signal overload. And then came the next message, short, cold, final. Surrender the three, or surrender the species. Back in hospital, Leo stood unaided now. His eyes were clear, but something inside them was older, not broken, not corrupted, but awake. He looked at his friends and said quietly, "I remember now. Who I was. Who I am." Arya stepped forward. "You're Leo. You're human." He tilted his head. "No, I'm something that wore human skin." Juno took his hand, calm as ever. "We all are." In orbit, the commanders gathered their fleets. Drax, Nox, Vale. Three monsters of war, legends of Earth, and now, hopelessly outgunned. "We're not ready," Kara whispered. Drax grinned grimly. "Then we improvise." Vale loaded the virus protocol into the comms system, a last-ditch countermeasure built for an enemy no one believed existed. And then Arya's voice came through, broadcasting from within the medical core. "Stop. You can't fight them." "Arya," Drax barked. She stood before the screen, expression unreadable. Behind her, Juno and Leo stood shoulder to shoulder. "We're not human. Not entirely. But we're still your children." She looked directly into the camera. "Let's talk to them." And across space, within the lead ship of the claimant armada, a massive bioentity unfolded its consciousness. It had no name, no shape, no morality, only purpose. And for the first time in 10,000 years, it whispered across the stars. Begin Integration Protocol. Chapter 4. The Children Who Remember. Earth was silent. No ships fired. No warning shots. The sky was filled with claimant vessels, more organic than mechanical, like living monuments orbiting in judgment. And yet, humanity did not surrender, because the children had asked for time. In the deep chamber below Arkan Command, Arya sat alone. At least, she looked alone. Inside her mind, the connection had begun. A bridge, ancient, alien, alive. She saw through thousands of eyes, felt the pulse of stars collapsing, heard languages older than DNA. The claimants were not simply here to reclaim. They were here to reunite. Leo stood at the edge of a Martian cliff, wind tearing at his jacket. He remembered now all of it, not just his human memories, but those from before. He'd once been a librarian of neural patterns on a moon that no longer existed. He'd recorded the thoughts of dying civilizations. He'd chosen to sleep, to be reborn, until war triggered his awakening. And now, he felt cold, and angry, and powerful. Juno stood in a ruined temple on Europa, a place she'd never been, but somehow knew. She traced symbols on the wall, eyes glowing faintly. The past was leaking through. The memory of a decision long ago. If ever the children awaken, send the fleet. If they resist, erase their world. If they remember, kneel. Back on Earth, the commanders waited. Drax, Nox, Vale. They watched as the children broadcast a signal toward the claimant flagship. Not a weapon, but a code. A code buried in their DNA. A command. High above, the lead ship pulsed. And then it knelt. Not literally, but its orbit changed slightly, a shift in formation that translated in claimant protocol to submission. Inside every ship, ancient neural networks froze. Awaiting orders. Arya opened her eyes. They're listening. Juno nodded. They're waiting. Leo stepped forward, voice low. Then let's give them something to believe in. That night, the skies cleared. The ships didn't leave, but they didn't attack. They simply watched. A galactic standoff. Not of weapons, but of will. And far beyond the stars, something else stirred. The forgotten ones. The rivals of the claimants. The ones who believed that evolution should be earned, not engineered. They had seen the signal too, and they were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to wipe the slate clean. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Return. In the cold dark between galaxies, a signal echoed. It wasn't made of sound. It wasn't light or data. It was pure intent, broadcast through quantum strings and forgotten laws of reality. The claimants felt it first. They flinched, not physically but psychically. Their fleets shimmered. Their patterns broke formation. On Earth, Arya, Leo, and Juno gasped in unison. Something older than the claimants had heard them, and now it was coming. The forgotten ones. No one had spoken their name in eons, because the claimants had erased it from every known star map, every archive, every living memory. But deletion is not extinction. Some memories hide in the blood. Juno was the first to remember them clearly. She saw images in her sleep, cities carved into living moons, battles fought in dream space, star gods falling like ash across nebulae, and above all a voice, not cruel, not angry, just disappointed. They gave humanity wings it did not earn. It is time to pluck them. Back at Arkan Command, chaos bloomed. Admiral Kara and Nox barked orders into the void, eyes locked on dozens of sensor screens. Confirm the readings. That can't be right. Her aide's face was pale. Ma'am, we've got over 200 unknown objects approaching from intergalactic void space. No drive signatures. No propulsion. Just movement. Hostile. Unknown. But she hesitated. They're leaving a trail of non-reality behind them. Wherever they pass, stars flicker out. Meanwhile, Drax had a different approach. He stood aboard the Iron Spire, a Titan-class warcruiser capable of cracking moons, surrounded by enough firepower to render an entire system into vapor. He wasn't watching screens. He was loading a gauntlet onto his left arm, a relic from the early planetary wars, now pulsing with ancient energy. His voice was quiet, deadly. If gods come knocking, we answer with artillery. But the children knew better. They're not gods, Leo said, standing on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. There is something else. Something wrong. You mean worse than the claimants? Arya asked. They don't want to reclaim us, Juno whispered. They want to unmake us. Erase the experiment completely. Across the solar system, claimant ships shifted position, falling back from Earth. Not fleeing, recalibrating. Even these ancient architects knew fear. Aboard the claimant flagship, Arya was granted an audience with a being known only as the Rememberer, a construct of crystallized thought and decay time. Its form flickered between a human child and an alien star beast. We were wrong, it admitted. You awakened too early. They were not supposed to know. Who are they? Arya asked. They're the answer to our arrogance. The cost of giving fire to the clay. They come to restore balance by ending you. Back on Earth, Ronan Vale did something he hadn't done in decades. He prayed, not to any god, not to science, but to the part of him that still believed in humanity's right to exist. Then he looked at the gathered military commanders and spoke the unthinkable. We have to ally with the claimants. Drax growled. You want us to side with the freaks who experimented on our kids? They made them. Yes, Vale said, but they want to protect them now. These new things, they want everything dead. Silence. Then Kara Knox nodded once. Fine. But the second this war is over, I'm nuking every claimant archive into stardust. In orbit, the first forgotten object arrived. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even matter. It was a void, shaped like a tear in the skin of reality, and it pulsed with intelligence. The moment it appeared, 12 claimant vessels vanished. Not exploded, not destroyed, just gone, unmade. Arya felt it like a punch in the soul. They're starting. Juno closed her eyes. They'll erase this solar system in hours. Leo looked up at the sky. His eyes were pure white now. His voice, when he spoke, wasn't just his. Then it's time we remember who we were. Deep within Arya's chest, something unlocked. A lattice of memory. A vault of identity. She saw herself as she once was. A commander of memory fleets. A guardian of thought seeds. A protector of mortal spark. She wasn't just a prototype. She was a failsafe. So were Leo and Juno. Not tools. Not weapons. Counters. In the dark between worlds, the Forgotten continued their descent. But now someone was ready. 3 children, glowing with ancient light. 3 commanders, armed with human rage. And a dying species, standing between gods and oblivion. The final war hadn't begun yet, but the line had been drawn. And for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity was not just reacting. It was fighting back. Chapter 6, The Spark Before the Storm. The world didn't end that night, but it came close. Over Earth's orbit, the sky remained littered with the unnatural presence of the Forgotten. Their void-shaped vessels loomed like tears in existence, each one radiating a silence deeper than death. In the command bunker beneath Mount Erebus, Kara Knox stared at the planetary defense interface. Watching cities brace for impact, families hide in underground vaults, and the claimant ships form a loose perimeter around Earth. Defensive, desperate. Luke and Drax stood beside her, silent, helmet tucked under one arm. He didn't speak unless violence was immediately necessary. And right now, violence was inevitable. General Vale entered the room flanked by 2 claimant avatars, ethereal beings of light and memory. The tension in the room thickened instantly. Drax tensed, Kara reached for her sidearm, and 3 armed guards raised rifles. Vale raised a hand. Stand down. They're here to talk. Talk. Drax growled. I thought they came to die. The avatars bowed with impossible grace. One spoke in a voice that vibrated through the walls. We are here to forge an accord. Not to survive. To resist. Kara lowered her weapon, only slightly. We need more than poetic speeches, memory beast. We need to stop the void before it touches the ground. The children are the key, the avatar said. Drax laughed bitterly. We know. Everyone wants the damned kids. No, the avatar replied. You misunderstand. They're not tools. They're the last functioning gatekeepers of the Helix Code. They can seal the rift. Karen narrowed her eyes. And you waited until now to tell us. You had not yet earned their awakening, the avatar replied. Now you have. On the upper decks of Arkan Tower, Arya stood barefoot on the observation platform, looking up at the jagged wounds in the sky. The void shimmered, refusing all logic, bending stars around them like broken reflections. Leo sat cross-legged nearby, eyes closed, pulse steady. His breathing echoed, not just in the air, but in the stone beneath their feet. Something ancient inside him was stirring. Juno had gone quiet, not from fear but focus. She was mapping the thought patterns of the enemy, not with technology, but instinct. She was building a picture, one thread at a time. Arya turned. We don't have long. Leo nodded. I can feel it. They're anchoring. Juno opened her eyes, glowing faintly. They want to unbind our concept of self. If they finish stabilizing, it's not just the planet that dies. It's our meaning. Arya closed her eyes. Then we stop them before they finish. At 0600 hours, the Alliance launched its counter-operation, Project Last Light. Human warships, rearmed with alien tech and prototype drives. Claimant memory fleets stitched into reality like threads of fire. Coordinated with terrifying efficiency. The objective, target the rift nodes powering the Forgotten Fleet. 3 of them, one above Saturn, one orbiting Alpha Luna. and one descending toward Earth. Admiral Kara Knox took command of the orbital fleet, launching directly at the Earthbound node. Drax led the Mars detachment towards Saturn, and Vale, armed with nothing but encrypted knowledge and an untested psychic matrix, was dropped into Alpha Luna with a claimant escort. The children did not go with them. Not yet. They had a different mission. Inside the subterranean vault of the Helix core, Arya, Leo, and Juno stepped into the activation chamber. It wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was alive, humming with neural light and pre-language thought. The chamber had been waiting for them since before their birth, perhaps before humanity even crawled from oceans. At the center floated a crystalline sphere, pulsing softly. Leo placed his hand on it. Immediately, light exploded around them. Memories flooded their minds. Not their own. Thousands. Millions. Generations of prototypes, failed and forgotten. Whole branches of humanity erased before the first caveman ever touched fire. They saw wars that never happened. Futures denied. The full extent of the claimant's manipulations. But they also saw something else, what humanity could become. Not gods, not slaves, but something entirely new. Arya stepped forward. If we activate this, we don't get to be normal again. Juno tilted her head. We were never normal. Leo smiled slightly. Let's rewrite the rules. All three placed their hands on the core, and the Helix awakened. In the skies above, something changed. The voids rippled. The largest of the forgotten ships paused mid-drift. Across every ship, human or alien, a single phrase echoed through open comms. Protocol Ascension recognized. Universal parameters reset. Host class emergence confirmed. Drax heard it. Kara heard it. The claimants fell silent. And in the heart of Earth, three children no longer were. They had become something else. And whatever happened next, they would no longer run from it. They would decide what survived. Chapter 7, Children of the Rift. The sky above Earth no longer looked like the sky. It was torn, stretched, as if space itself had bruised. The Forgotten had arrived not with engines or weapons, but with presence. Their ships, if they could be called that, floated in orbit like fractures in reality. They were not built. They were born. And now, they were watching. At Aegis Observatory, drifting in low orbit, General Ronan Vale stood at the edge of the command glass, his breath fogging the reinforced viewpane. Above him, a single massive entity hovered, blacker than space, shaped like a teardrop of molten obsidian. Bigger than the moon, silent and unmoving. That silence was what haunted him most. He didn't know what was worse, that it wasn't attacking, or that it was waiting. Back on Earth, deep beneath Arkan Command, Arya, Leo, and Juno stood motionless inside the Helix Vault. The room pulsed with a soft hum, like a living memory. Their outlines shimmered, no longer entirely human. Light curled off their skin in threads. Gravity bent slightly around them. They could feel it, a presence beneath perception, a heartbeat at the edge of everything. It wasn't a sound or a vibration, it was expectation. The universe itself was holding its breath. Leo was the first to speak. His voice carried strange harmonics, echoing as though three versions of him were speaking at once. They're testing us. Juno nodded, her eyes glowing white. They want to know if we'll fight or submit. Arya stepped forward, gazing at her own hands like they were no longer hers. We're not children anymore. And somewhere, something hurt her. The earth trembled, not from force, but from concept. Communications blacked out. AI systems stuttered and died. And then, a voice, not spoken, but etched into the collective minds of every being on the planet, echoed. Return to form. Return to silence. Your time was borrowed. On Mars, military outposts collapsed in silence, their structures dissolving into raw matter. On Neptune's moons, orbital defense grids simply vanished, wiped from existence without impact or energy signature. Nothing remained, not even heat, but Earth remained untouched. For now, in a command chamber somewhere under the Atlantic Ocean, Admiral Kara Knox pushed herself off the floor, her skull still ringing. Was that an attack? Drax stood nearby, blood running from a cut above his brow. His voice was low. No, that was a warning. Again the voice came. Cold, absolute. Surrender the bearers. Or share their end. In the Helix vault, the children didn't flinch. The core pulsed behind them, ancient, alive, awake. Arya could feel humanity clinging to her like a memory. Not her memory, but a species' memory. She wasn't just representing them. She was them. Juno raised a hand, and in her palm bloomed a glowing symbol, one that wasn't a letter or a number or even a shape. It was an equation of potential, something ancient and fractal. Leo's voice came low, full of weight. We don't need to resist them with power. We need to rewrite the rules. You mean reality? Arya asked. Juno didn't hesitate. They're trying to erase us. Let's overwrite what they think is possible. Above the planet, the void ships shifted. The largest descended. Not like a vessel, but like a memory returning. A physical presence of forgotten judgment. Its arrival wasn't marked by noise, but by failure. Planes fell from the sky. Clock stopped. Oceans rippled and froze into impossible geometries. The first forgotten entity reached into the atmosphere. Earth held its breath. Arya stepped forward. She spoke, not in English, not in any spoken tongue, but in a language of thought. The language of claimants, of Helix code, of mankind's hidden potential. We are not your mistake. We are not your failed design. We are the echo of what you tried to bury. The forgotten paused, not from fear, but from recognition. It had heard that voice before. It had seen her before, not as a child, but as something else, something that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The children were no longer the variables. They were becoming the constant. Not the end, but the beginning. Chapter 8. Rewrite the end. The world had gone quiet. Not with peace. Not with destruction. With anticipation. Above the earth, the forgotten entity hung like judgment given form. Immense, unblinking, eternal. Its very presence distorted memory and meaning. History frayed. Time bled sideways. Children forgot their names. Old men remembered futures that had never happened. It was not here to fight. It was here to delete. And yet it waited. Waited for them. Arya stood at the center of the Helix vault, her hands at her sides, her pulse echoing through the core of the planet. Around her, Leo and Juno hovered in place, no longer bound by gravity. Their thoughts braided together into one mind, one intention, one choice. Above them, the Helix spun faster. It wasn't a machine. It was a seed, a rewriting tool, designed not to destroy the enemy, but to overwrite everything they believed to be true. Leo spoke, and the world shook. We are not your accident. Juno followed, voice like starlight tearing through darkness. We are not your property. Arya opened her eyes. They were no longer eyes. They were windows into something vast. You gave us limits. We outgrew them. And the Helix responded. It bloomed like a flower made of light and sound. Across the Earth, across the solar system, across every neural network, memory bank, and biological brain, a new signal pulsed. Not a weapon, a truth, a new definition of what it meant to be human. Not a species, not an experiment, a choice. The forgotten entity trembled. Its surface cracked, not physically but conceptually. Its purpose fractured. Its certainty collapsed, because it could no longer deny what had taken root. The children weren't data. They weren't variables. They were authors, and they had just written a reality where the forgotten could no longer exist. Not with violence, with irrelevance. The great void ship dimmed, flickered, and vanished. Not into space, not into death. It was simply overwritten, erased by the story it could not control. All around the Earth, the sky cleared, the silence lifted, and for the first time in days, humanity could see the stars again. Kara Knox dropped her rifle and leaned back against a wall of cracked alloy, staring up at the open sky. Luke and Drax grunted, half impressed, half horrified. Remind me never to ground those kids. Ronan Vale smiled faintly. You couldn't, even if you tried. In the Helix vault, the light faded. The children slowly descended to the ground. Their eyes returned to normal. Their bodies were once again small, human, fragile. But something in the air had changed. Juno looked at the others, her voice soft now. Is it over? Arya looked up at the sky. No, she said. It's just started. Leo laughed quietly. Good. They walked out of the vault together. 3 children. 3 gods. 3 authors of a future no longer written by fear. Above them, the stars burned a little brighter. Because the universe had been changed, and humanity was no longer just a part of it. It was a force within it. The end.